WGSE. My name is Penny Curry, and I'm reporting today from Perryville, Kentucky. You may wonder, why is Miss Curry in Perryville, Kentucky? Well, I'm going to tell you that since I can't bring the Civil War to life in the classroom, I'm going to take you on some adventures to bring it to life in your home. So today, I'm at a famous Civil War battlefield. I'm going to take you to different places and show you some weapons and some tactics that they used on this landscape in the Civil War. So we're going to have a great time. I hope you're enjoying your time. Stay safe, and I hope to see you soon. Welcome back. I'm reporting now from what's known as the Valley of Death. Here the Confederates were marching in line through this area, not knowing that to the west and to the north, the Unions were camped on top of the hills waiting to attack them. As soon as the Confederates entered this valley, they started firing from both directions. The Confederates got very disoriented. A lot of them lost their lives. They were able to regroup and keep on marching, but it's known as the Valley of Death because unfortunately they had to leave many men behind. Back live now. As I was walking through all of this battlefield, I noticed this creek running through here with this low area land and then a hill up top, and I thought, I can just picture an army stopping here, maybe having a lookout and tents set up, and they're camping out here, and they have this water source. They can see everything from this side. They've got the top of the hill. So there are many places on this huge battlefield that they could set up camp, or they could have lookout, other than just in these open fields fighting battles. I'm at the top of this hill, and I'm at a point where we can see that the physical features can either help you or hurt you. And in this case, the Confederates were hurt because the Union Army was actually lined up on the second hill. I don't know if you can see, there's a first hill, a valley, and the second hill is farther back. The Confederates didn't know this, and they were firing their cannons thinking they were hitting them when they were landing on the first hill, but the Unions were on the second hill. So at this point, they were using the land, the Unions were using the land to their advantage. At this point, General Stuart's Confederate brigade came in, and they were going to push back the Unions. And if you can see in the far distance, there's a plank fence through there. His men were to pass the fence to drive the Unions back. They were so panicked and so stressed with the battle that instead of climbing over the short fence or just removing a railing, they tried to squeeze through the rails and got stuck. And tons of them, it says scores of them, were shot down, stuck in that fence. That is just an example of the tragedy and how war takes a toll on even your thinking. We're back live, still in Perryville, Kentucky. On this spot at the top of this hill, General James S. Jackson fell in defeat. He was actually born in Fayette County, Kentucky, and served in many different areas, but in the end, this is where he lost his life in battle. I want to show you one of the cannons that they used here on top of this hill. There were 8 of them. The Unions were camped up here, and all of a sudden they look up and you see all the hills. We talked about the hills and how they helped them fight. thousands of Confederates came up over the hill out of nowhere. So General Terrell was in charge, and he started firing. He ordered them to fire 8 cannons, but he knew he wasn't going to be able to hold them off. So he actually initiated a bayonet charge. If you remember, a bayonet is what goes on the end of their musket, meaning face-to-face battle. So they went down, they knew they couldn't conquer them, and in the end, the Union lost that battle. Back on the scene here, we are at what's called the Sleet House. This is such an amazing story. After the Civil War, 2 slaves, Henry and Preston Sleet, sharecropped all of this land, and they laid the foundation for this first house. And it became this booming community for African Americans. They had a restaurant, they had everything they would need in this community. And they all shared the land together, and they were friends with all their neighbors and their white neighbors, even in the early 20th century when Kentucky was completely segregated, which we will talk about later. They still worked hand in hand and were friendly with all of their white neighbors around them. There was no segregation. This was known as Sleet Town. They stayed here. It was a booming community until the Great Depression struck, and everybody ended up moving on into Perryville. But until that time, it had been a booming community that was started by 2 freed slaves, Henry and Preston, after the Civil War ended. Back on scene, we're here at Doctor's Creek. Now we would think, oh, this is a great place for the armies to camp. They need water. That would be something that they really needed. However, this battle happened during extreme drought, and all of this was just mud with very little water at all in it. So we had one company here, one brigade was Jones's brigade, Confederate Army, and across the way a little bit was another Confederate Army who was coming behind. Now they could hear distant rifles shots, but they had no idea how far away the Union Army was. So they were going to charge up this hill and see how far away they were from the Union Army, having no idea that when they got to the top of the hill, the Union Army was there waiting on them. And there was yet again another bloody battle. We're here at Jones Ridge on the top of this little hill, and the Confederates, there were 900 of them with Jones and his brigade, but they faced 5,000 Union soldiers on top of the hill. So they started driving that way, and they knew that they could not match the force of the Union Army, so they came back, but not without losing many, many men. Fortunately for the Confederates, the Unions were running low on ammunition, so they were able to survive. But with all the blood loss there's a sinkhole in between these 2 hills, and the story is that the sinkhole was actually running red with blood because there were so many men who were wounded or died in this battle. This is the home of H.P. Bottom. He was the farmer who owned all of this land. After a mass attack against the Confederates, they actually took over his house. But after all of the battles were over, H.P. Bottom was the man who dug the pits and buried as many soldiers and identified them before he buried them. He did that for as many as he could. Hello, I'm back at where we started. The battle was over. The Confederates in the end won the victory, there were more than 2,400 men that died, 1,000 of them Confederate, almost 1,500 Union soldiers. Now, even though the Confederates won, they were still greatly outnumbered, so they had to flee Perryville that very night after the last battle. So the Union stayed behind and quickly buried their dead, but the Confederates just left their men and horses lying dead all over the battlefield. Well, in a couple of days, hogs, buzzards, crows, they were all coming. They were digging. The hogs were rooting the bodies up out of the graves. The buzzards, the crows were here. So Henry P. Bottom was the farmer that owned all of this land, and he got his slaves and his neighbors to help him, and they dug 2 large pits, this being one of the pits, and he recorded as many names as he could, but they buried 200 bodies in this pit and one in another pit. And that was the only burial that these soldiers received. So in 1902, this monument was made here in honor of those soldiers who lost their lives on this scene. Now remember, the Civil War is such a dark time in our history when we were fighting brother against brother. So this is such a sad moment in our history, and to think of all of the dads, brothers, uncles, grandfathers that are buried right here in this pit. Welcome. Thank you for joining us on WGSE. My name is Penny Curry, and I'm reporting live from Perryville. Boys and girls, I want you to know how much I love you. I'm out here filming at this old slave house, and a snake crawled out from under the porch. Signing off, I'm out of here.